Hi everyone, my name is Giovanna Proença, and today we're gonna talk about Runoff, the problem set 3 of CS50. And if you want to know more about programming and get the solution of this problem, check the description below. Alright, so we're gonna solve the problem, and to do this, I'm gonna explain a little bit how Runoff works, and then we're gonna take a look at the code. Okay, so let's see the idea of Runoff. So what is the purpose of Runoff? So basically we're gonna receive some votes from about some candidates, and we're gonna check who is the winner for this election. It's a little bit more complicated than plurality, and so far I'm expecting that you already did plurality, the previous problem set for week 3, okay? And in here, the main difference between plurality and runoff is that instead of voting in one candidate only, here you're gonna rank your candidates in order of preference. And this way we call as ranked choice voting system, all right? So let's suppose we have 3 candidates, Alice, Bob, and Charlie. And you wanna vote in this new election right now. So you're gonna put in order of preference which candidate you prefer. So for example, I prefer Alice, so Alice will be on the first place, then Bob, and then Charlie. And you can do this in multiple combinations, okay? So basically your code will grab all the votes that the candidates had, and then you're gonna see the order of preference, and then you're gonna give us the result of this election, if it was tie or if we have a winner, okay? And I know it's a little bit more complicated than that, but this is just an overview of how Runoff will work, okay? So let's see what we have in our code so far, all right? And then we can start working with what we have to do. Let's see. So now, let's see what we have in our code, all right? So please remember to download the code that they give to us in the requirements, all right? And then let's take a look what we have in here. So on line 1 and 2, we are just importing the libraries from CS50 and the stdio that we need, okay? Then, what we have on line 5 and 6, we are creating 2 global variables, all right? The first global variable is related to the max number of voters, and here we're setting as 100, okay? And then we have another global variable that is the max number of candidates, and we're setting here again as 9, all right? So then, on line 9, we have our preferences, right? And what is the type of our preferences? This will be a matrix, okay? Where the I here that he's talking about, it's how many rows we have in this matrix, and the J is how many columns we have in this matrix. So basically we're gonna have at maximum 100 voters, so 100 rows, and at maximum 9 columns, all right? So this will depend, so we're creating basically a matrix with 100 rows and 9 candidates, okay? We're creating this array in here, this matrix. Then on line 12, we're creating the type def strict. So strict is the concept that we're learning in this week, all right? So we're basically creating a new type here. It's like when we're creating, for example, when we say int, we're creating a new type here that has name candidate, all right? Or we can think about string, int, float. They are defined types that we have in programming, but you can create your own type if you want. That this is what we're doing right now. So if you take a look, we have here the candidate, and what are the properties that candidate has? We have a string, all right, that will have that will be called name. So here we're gonna create a candidate. So for example, Alice. This will be the place for Alice, all right. This candidate also has a space for the number of votes, so it's an integer, and also we have a space for a boolean a type boolean that is going to tell us if the candidate was eliminated or not. This is one logic that we're going to create during the code, okay? So basically, our candidate is this table that we're seeing right now. We have an empty table because we didn't create any candidate, where one column will be the name, another column will be the votes, and another column will be the eliminated, all right? This table, this is a way of thinking, not actually, this is how it's going to be on the code, okay? Then, on our line 21, we are creating an array that has named candidates, all right? And the size is, the length, right, is 9, because it's the number of max candidates. And what is the type of this array? We normally see the type of array like int, string, float, like I said before. But in this case, we are using the type candidate. So our candidates array will have these 3 information here, all right? Then we're creating here the number of voters or candidates. So we're creating some 2 global variables right now, 2 integers that has no value. And we're putting here the prototypes for a function, because remember, every time we are working with C language, we have to set the prototypes of the functions before the main function, all right? So this way we don't have any bug. So this will be the functions that we're gonna do, all right? We already have the structure, but we have to actually code on them. So we have the vote, tabulate, print winner, find min, is tie and eliminated, all right? We're gonna see how to do this in a second. Now let's understand what is happening in our main function. So we have our main function, and here, do you see, we're being very explicit on how on the parameters we have in our main function. So this means that this is kind of a hint that we're gonna get things from the command line here in the terminal, all right? So we're gonna use the argv and argc. So the first thing we're doing here, we're checking if we have at least 2 items in our terminal. So what this means, we're checking if we're receiving this, at least this, all right? So we're seeing if we have at least 2 candidates in our election, all right? So let's see now this for loop, okay? So we're gonna do a loop where our maximum value, or the limit of our loop, will be how many candidates we have. And the purpose of this for loop is to populate our candidates array. All right, so do you remember the candidates array? We define it on line 21, and the type struct of this candidates array will contain the name, votes, and eliminated for every candidate, all right? So what are we going to do here basically? If we do here, for example, Python, let me see, not Python, sorry. If we do here like Runoff, Alice, Bob, and Charles, all right? So we're gonna have 3 candidates here, and we're gonna populate them in here. So what is argv 0 plus 1? It's the element on position 1. So we're gonna get Alice here, okay? So the first row of our table, so the first column of our table, we're gonna have Alice, okay? And then we're gonna have 0 votes because we're initializing the candidate, and then we're gonna initialize again as well the eliminated to false, because so far all the candidates, they are able to run for this election, all right? No one was eliminated. We're gonna create this logic in the future. Then, for example, we have Bob, so we're gonna do the same for the second element on our array. So we're gonna have Bob, 0 votes, and false for eliminated. And then the third one will be Charles. So we're gonna have the element on position 3 will be Charles, the name Charles, vote 0, and false for eliminated. Okay, so in here we're populating our candidates array. Okay, then we're gonna ask for the user to put the number of voters. Okay, so we're gonna know how many votes we're gonna have. So for example, here in CS50, we can see that we have 5 voters. All right, so we have 5. We're asking 5 times the rank. Okay, and how are we gonna ask the rank? Before this, we have to check if we have more than 100 voters. If we have more than 100 voters, we're gonna receive this message not allowing us to do this. But if we have less than 100 votes, we are able to store the information of the votes. So right now we're gonna get all of the ballots, all right, and we're gonna store somewhere. So for example, here we're gonna do a for loop through every voter that we have, and then we're gonna do a for loop through every candidate. Okay, because we know how many candidates we have and we know how many voters, right? So we're gonna ask for the first rank. For example, if we have rank Alice, so rank 1 will be Alex, rank 2 will be Charlie, and rank 3 will be Bob. Actually, it's the opposite in here, right? So we're gonna ask each rank at a time, and we're gonna call the function vote to check if the vote is valid or not, all right? So if the vote is not valid, we're gonna print invalid vote, and we're gonna stop the code. Then if all the votes are valid, we're gonna do a while loop here, okay? So we're gonna do a while true, so keep holding runoffs until winner exists. We're gonna call the tabulate function. We're gonna see in the future what tabulate function does. Then we're gonna create a variable called 1 that it's going to be either true or false, and the value of 1 will be set by the print winner function. Okay, so if we have a winner, so if 1 is true, we reach the purpose of this problem, all right? Otherwise, we're gonna keep looping, okay? Then we're gonna do int min. We're gonna create a variable min where we're gonna find the minimum votes that the candidates has. We're gonna implement this. We also have a variable tie where we're gonna store if it's tie or not. So if it's tie, we're gonna print if it's tie, everyone wins, so we're gonna print all the winners if it's tie. And then if it's not tie, we're gonna call the eliminate function to eliminate anyone within the minimum number of votes, all right? And we're gonna implement the eliminate function. And then we're gonna reset vote counts back to 0, all right? In the end, doing this part of the for loop, and then we'll return 0. Because what? If you take a look, all of this is inside of a while. So we're gonna do all this track, make everything 0, and then we go back again. And we're gonna do this while loop while we don't have a winner, okay? So that's it. Now, let's start implementing the functions. And to do this, let's understand what we have to do on votes. Okay, so now let's do vote. Okay, so like we saw here, it is called every time we are getting the rank, the name of the candidate that the user will input here, okay? And the vote, we're gonna check if the vote is valid, if the name of the candidate exists in our candidates array, okay? So what are the requirements to do this? We're gonna receive an int, so we're gonna receive a number for the voter, okay? We're gonna receive a rank and a name, right? Let's see what this means. So basically, if we see in here, it's the number of the voters. So for example, if we are storing the information about the first voter, the voter will have the value 0, okay? J is the number of the candidate that we are storing, so the number of the rank, and name is the name of the candidate. So what is actually happening in here? Let's take a look. So basically, we're gonna receive 3, let's suppose we have 3 voters, all right? We have 3 ballots. So the first ballot, we have Alice, Bob, and Charlie, in this order of rank. In the second ballot, we have Alice, Charlie, and Bob. And in the third ballot, we have Bob, Alice, and Charlie. So what we have to do in this vote function, we're gonna get all the names in the candidate and that the voter will give to us. And we're gonna first check if the candidate exists, all right? If the candidate exists, for example, Alice exists in our candidates array, we're gonna get the name of Alice and we're gonna add in the preference of the first voter, all right? So the Alice is in the first rank, so it's going to be in the first position of the first voter in preferences matrix, all right? Then the second rank is Bob, so we're adding here to Bob, then Charlie, and we're adding here to Charlie, all right? So this is kind of the goal, and we're gonna start populating the preferences matrix, okay? Now let's see the requirement for CS50. So basically, to complete the function, we're gonna have here what we already saw. If the name of the candidate match with the validated name of the candidates we have in candidate array, then you should update the global preferences away to indicate that the voter has that candidate as the rank preference, all right? So if it's the first preference one, like we said before. If the preference is successfully recorded, the function should return true. The function should return false otherwise, all right? And you may assume that no two candidates will have the same name. This is good because, like, if we had two Alices, it would be a little bit more complicated, all right? So as we can see, the number of the candidate and the number, we're gonna receive the number of the voter and the number of the candidate, right? So the position in the array where we are storing everything. So we're gonna turn this table of preferences here into numbers. So for example, in the candidates array, we have here Alice, 0 votes, and eliminated false. What is the position of Alice? It's 0, okay? So in preferences, instead of having the name Alice, we're gonna store as number 0, all right? For Bob, here in preferences, Bob, we're not gonna let Bob. We're gonna get the index of Bob in the candidates array, and we're gonna store here in our preferences. So for example, here, Bob has number 1, so in preferences, we're gonna populate as number 1. And we're gonna do this so on and so forth, all right, until we have all the preferences populated. Okay, sounds good. So understanding a little bit of how it's going to work, now let's put hands-on practice and start coding, okay? So let's just start implementing the function, all right? So like we said before, let's do some notes. So we're gonna take these arguments here, and we have to match. We have to check if the name that we're receiving matches with the name of a valid candidate. All right, so this is very important. How are we gonna do this? So first, we have to do a loop through every candidate we have in our candidates array. All right, so how can we do this? We're gonna do a for int I equals to 0. Okay, because we always start, the initial value in our array is always 0 in programming actually. We're gonna loop until the candidate count, I think it's this way it's written, candidate count, if we take a look here in the global variable, all right? Because this will be how many candidates we have in our election. And we're gonna do I++ because we wanna iterate through every element. Then, inside of our loop, the goal here is to match if the name in here in our candidates array is the same name that we received in the input of the user, in the vote. Okay, so how are we gonna do this? If we search here, string compare, there is a function that has name string comp. Okay, I like the CS50 manual. Let's see the CS50 manual, it's much better. So what this will do for us? This string compare function will compare two strings, all right? This is how we compare strings in C. So here, do you see? It's a string, and we're gonna pass two parameters. So in our case, will be the name that we're receiving every time we call the function and the name in the candidate array, all right? And one thing that is interesting is that if the function returns us less than zero, if the function returns as a number that is different than 0, this means that the strings are not the same, all right? But if the function returns as 0, this means that the strings are the same. So here we're gonna do an if condition, checking if when we call the function string compare, passing as parameter the name of the candidate and the candidate on the array, if this function returns as 0, this means that the name matches. So this way we can move on with what we need to do in this code, all right? So we're gonna do if, so here is string, let me just remember, is string compare strcomp, okay, so strcomp. And we have to pass two parameters, as we can see in here, all right? We pass two parameters. So here I'm gonna use candidates, because this is the name of the array we're working. The value of I, because we're doing iteration, dot name, because we wanna get the name from this structure that we use, this struct that we're using. And the second name I'm passing is the regular name that we're getting here on when we're calling the function, all right? If the string compare it's equals 0, this means that this name exists. If this name exists, let's see what we have to do. So then you should update the global preferences array to indicate that the voter has that candidate as their rank preference, all right? So this is what we're gonna do right now. So let me see one thing. Great. So we're gonna do in here, let me put comment. We're gonna do this, okay, the second part. So we're gonna update our preferences matrix. So how can we do this? We're gonna use preferences. This is the, preferences, this is the name of the matrix. In the position in here, the first square bracket, it's about the voter, because we need to know what is the voter. Take a look at here what I'm displaying the screen. So what is the voter here? We're receiving the voter as the variable voter. Okay, so here we're gonna use voter. And the second part of the matrix is the rank. So here we're gonna put the rank, all right? So preferences and rank, we're gonna be equals to the value of I. And what is the value of I? It's the number of the candidate. So we're doing that thing that we saw previously in the animation, all right? So we're updating the preferences table, the preferences matrix, where we're saying, oh, the voter 0 in his rank 1, he's saying that his preference is Alice, and the number of Alex is 0, for example. All right, so we're just making everything we saw into code. And then after doing this, remember to use semicolon. And let's see here. So if the preferences is successfully recorded, the function should return true. So after this, we're gonna return true, all right? Otherwise, so if none of this happens, we're returning false, okay? Now let's see the tabulate function working. So now we're gonna do the tabulate function, all right? So the goal of tabulate is tabulate votes for non-eliminated candidates. Let's try to understand what's going to happen. So, so the function should update the number of votes each candidate has at this stage in the runoff. And we have to recall that each stage in the runoff, every voter effectively votes for their top preferred candidate who has not already been